Have you ever thought about why your town or city is located where it is rather than 10 miles south or east, for example? It almost certainly has to do with geography, either physical geography or human geography. Many cities are located near large bodies of water for easier transportation of goods and for the resources that body of water can provide. Others are located in areas with a lot of agriculture, and a location was chosen partly because of proximity to a major route through the region, maybe a covered wagon trail or a railroad. Others grew in relatively remote locations because there was a valuable resource that could be found there. Every place will have a different combination of things that caused it to be located where it is, and that makes it unique. This type of consideration is often called historical geography because it considers how geography shaped history. What I want to suggest is that we need to apply these same principles when we think about the Bible. Have you ever wondered why Jerusalem is located where it is, or why it became such an important city in the region? It's for the same reasons, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, I'm Alana. I have a master's degree in historical geography of the Bible, and that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about some of the geography that shapes the land of the Bible. Before we even begin, I want to offer the caveat that we are giving a fast, quick, and dirty overview, which means that just about everything I say here is significantly simplified. And anytime things are simplified, there will be aspects that are wrong or lacking in enough nuance. I want to try to share some more accurate resources as we go if you want more details. So, grab a few colored pens and markers and let's mark this map. You can find a link in the description to a blank map. Strongly recommend that you download and print that out or draw a rough copy on a page so that you can mark things as we go along. So here we have our map. You can see that we have the main bodies of water labeled as well as a few city locations. We will label the cities with their names in a minute. I do want to note they tend to skew towards Hebrew scriptures more than the New Testament, and they are partly chosen for significance and partly to help guide our marking as we go forward. Feel free to pause as we go along if you need more time for map marking. I like to start at the Dead Sea. The J closest to it is Jericho, but then if we start at the top of the Dead Sea and move west, we come to another J, Jerusalem. From there, moving south, we hit Bethlehem, then Hebron. The farthest south B is Beersheba. Moving to the coast, the G is Gaza and the J is Joppa. Back to Jerusalem and heading north now, we hit Bethel, Shiloh, and then Shechem. Samaria is next to Shechem. The J farthest north is Jezreel. Above the Sea of Galilee, we have Chatzor and then Dan. And back to the coast, the A is Akko and the T is Tyre. A few of these places have names that have changed over time. Shechem, for example, became Sychar and today is Nablus. For simplicity, we're sticking with what we have labeled here, but just be aware that other maps may label them differently. The next thing we're going to do is play Connect the Dots. We're going to start south at Beersheba, then to Hebron, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Shiloh, Shechem, Samaria, and curve back around to Jezreel. This line is going to do a couple jobs for us. Go ahead and add a line to your key and we'll label it in a minute. First, it is roughly the continental divide. So rain that falls east of this divide flows east into the Jordan Valley. Rain that falls west of this flows west into the Mediterranean. This gives us some important information. Because of the ocean and the prevailing winds, most of the rain clouds in the region originate in the Mediterranean and move from west to east. As they move inland, they are forced upward by the rising hills. This tends to make them colder. Condensation is more likely to happen and rain is more likely to fall. But the continental divide is the high point. As the clouds continue east of there, elevation decreases, clouds go lower, get warmer, and are less likely to drop rain until they are pushed up again on the far side of the Jordan. This makes what we call a rain shadow. So we'll add some shading west and north of this line to indicate areas of more rain. And go ahead and add that to your key. And then we'll add a different color shading east and south of this line to indicate an area of less rain. In mine, I haven't shaded all the way east of the Jordan River because as the mountains rise from the Dead Sea, the rain does increase again a bit. A more accurate rain map looks like this. The lighter blue represents 12 to 16 inches of rain per year, and the darker blue is more than 16 inches. White is anything less than 12 inches. And our map gives a sense of the same pattern. This also gives us an agricultural divide. West of here tends to be good land for crops, whereas to the east, with less rain, crops are harder to grow. But what does grow can be used for grazing sheep and goats. This is the land of the shepherd. The second thing we can do with this line is if you want to avoid having to go down into the river valleys or wadis and back up as you travel north, this continental divide is going to be the best way to do that. It is a ridge route, still some up and down, but very few places where you have a significant change in elevation. To illustrate this, here's a mountain ridge from the Rockies. Imagine you want to get from point A to point B. You could try to go straight in that direction. On a map, that would appear to be the shortest route, but you would end up hiking down into valleys and back up several times. The easier route would be to move along the ridge from A to B. There will still be some up and down, but significantly less. The mountains in Israel are generally not this steep, but the principle is the same. Because we see Abraham and Jacob moving back and forth between these places, we have labeled this is likely the route they took, and thus this is typically called the patriarchal ridge route, and thus the label will add to the key. This also gives us our first reason why so many significant cities are located along this line. They are still in the region that gives enough rain to survive, and they are on one of the easiest routes for travel. Next, we're going to talk about rock. First rock is Cenomanian Limestone. First, we're going to draw a biggish blob in kind of the middle of everything. We'll start just above Beersheba, making a kind of U shape with the sides of the U about equidistant from the patriarchal ridge route. Around Jerusalem, both sides angle out towards Joppa and the Jordan Valley, then up and around, making the top of a heart shape at Shechem. This is Cenomanian limestone. This is arguably the best type of limestone in the area. It's strong, so it's good to build with. It makes good cisterns, has good springs. It breaks down into a fertile terra rosa soil. And this big section in the middle of the country is dominated by this type of limestone. And this is another reason for those cities to be here. They benefit from the good rocks and soil in this area. Our next rock is Eocene Limestone. Moving west of that chunk, we are going to sketch a smaller chunk toward the south of a second type of limestone, Eocene. Eocene limestone is sort of a second best. It tends to have a hard top crust that can be useful for building, but underneath is pretty soft and chalky. Because of this, there are a lot of caves in the area, often man-made or man-expanded. It produces a mediocre soil, but since it tends to be lower in elevation, it can get runoff from other regions, helping produce a richer soil. There seems to be a special word associated with the Eocene landscape, shephelah, often translated as lowland. If you've heard anyone talk about the biblical shephelah, most likely they meant this region. However, there are other areas of Eocene that may sometimes take the title of shephelah, so it's good to check the context. Our third type of rock is Senonian. Moving back to the east, between the chunk of Cenomanian and the Dead Sea is another smaller chunk. This one is Senonian Limestone. Senonian Limestone is a very chalky limestone and not good for much. The soil can grow things when it gets enough rain, but as you see with our rainfall shading, that doesn't happen that much. Enough grows here that sheep and goats can graze in parts of this area for much of the year. There's often water that can be found in the wadis or the occasional well or cistern. This section of Senonian is often referred to as the Judean wilderness. In Hebrew, the word midbar is used. The theme of wilderness is repeated in a lot of scriptures, and this is often the area that was pictured by the authors. Also worth noting, up north is a big chunk of basalt, and down south around Beersheba, making a kind of sideways snowman shape, is a type of soil called Loess, spelled Loess. This area is often referred to as the biblical Negev. The greater Negev is south of there. Most of the rest of the area is filled in with stripes of the three types of limestone in more complicated patterns than we're going to sketch today. But a fuller map would look like this. On this map, the areas that are still white are generally various types of soil or sand that has collected in valleys and low spots rather than rock. This is a great place to reconsider the topography of the land, again focusing in on the central region. If we draw a line from the coast to just south of Jerusalem and on through the Dead Sea, the change in elevation would look something like this. You can see that it stays flat for a while, rises a little as it gets to the Eocene Shephelah, or lowlands, and then continues up into the hill country, which we now know is the area of Cenomanian Limestone. It drops back down as it hits the Senonian and plunges below sea level at the Dead Sea. After that, it rises up again into the Transjordan highlands. Let's move back to the far west now, between the Shephelah and Eocene chunk and the Mediterranean Sea. This is the coastal plain, and you might think this seems like maybe the best land. First, it's a plain. Fairly flat and level, seems like it should be good for both travel and agriculture. And there is a major route that historically passed through here. So we're going to draw another line near the coast, starting in the south and then going north. It's going to swing a little east toward the Sea of Galilee and kind of keep going from there. This road is often called the Via Maris, or Way of the Sea. And that sounds historic, but almost certainly is not what it was called in ancient times. Then, as now, roads tended to be named by where they went. Taylorsville Road goes to Taylorsville. Shelbyville Road goes to Shelbyville. The Way of the Sea should go to the sea, not skip along beside it. So we will tend to call this road either the Coastal Highway or the International Trade Route. In addition to being good for travel, it is also good for agriculture. It should get plenty of water from both rain and runoff from higher in the hills most years. It has rich alluvial soil from that runoff, and since it's relatively flat, it should be good for agriculture. Plus, it has access to the sea, which can provide additional resources through both fish and possible trade routes. And that all sounds great, but there are a couple of catches. First, the ancient Israelites had no love of the sea. They seemed to see it as chaotic and dangerous, so having coastal access was not necessarily a perk. Second, the coast of Israel does not have much in the way of natural harbors, so even if they wanted to be a seafaring people, it's not a great area for that. Third, some of this area was rather swampy before modern drainage was put in, so there could be difficulties with that. And lastly, they had competition. We got some hints at the competition when we talked about the international trade route. If we zoom out and continue our line, it would head south to Egypt, and as it headed north, it can head east, Mesopotamia, including Aram, Syria, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia. Or it can continue north and swing west to Turkey and the Hittite Empire, or further west to Greece and Rome. There are several records of Egyptian armies headed north on this road to attack whatever northern kingdom was threatening them at the time. So any little villages or kingdoms in their way would just be collateral damage. No wonder the main cities of Israel are up in the hills. out of sight of those armies, hard to reach, and more easily defensible. These large empires that ended up controlling broad swaths of the region we like to call the cats. But cats fall in and out of power, and when the cat's away, the mice will play. We also have several mice in the region. One of the most powerful mice kingdoms was the Philistines, and they inhabited this coastal region. For a while, when Egypt was weak, the Philistines had it uncontested. This made them one of the closest and most threatening neighbors of the newborn nation of Israel. Yet another reason for the Israelites to tend to stay in the hills. There are several other mouse kingdoms that come to play in the story: Ammon, Edom, Moab, Tyre and Sidon, etc. These also varied in name and power over time. Always a thorn in the side of the Israelites, but generally never the full destructive force of the cat kingdoms. If you have studied the biblical text, likely you have at some point considered Hebrew or Greek vocabulary or syntax. In biblical geography, the syntax is dirt and rocks and rainfall. To quote Dr. Wright, one of my professors, "The foundations of the earth underlying each particular region strongly influenced ancient living conditions there. In the same way that scholars or students of the Bible text must keep returning to aspects of phonetics, morphology, and syntax when constructing meaningful and coherent understandings of the text, those who attempt to recover the geographical context of the Bible must continually return to the grammar of the building blocks of the land." Okay, so that is a ton of information to absorb over the course of this lesson. Don't worry, you won't be quizzed on rock types, but what I do hope you're starting to see is that there are reasons why the cities on this ridge route played such an important role and are recurring characters throughout the Bible. These cities have good rock for building and for storing water and for fortifications. They have good soil. They have enough rainfall for crops in a good year. They are near or on a good route for travel. They are far enough away from the coast to hopefully stay out of the way of the major powers moving through the area. And the high hills can make it difficult to approach some of the cities, though there are passes and routes that are easier than others. A city on a hill can also be more easily fortified and defended than a city in the lowlands. All of this allows us to see why this area became the heartland of the nation of Israel. If we look at the tribal allotments in Joshua 14 through 21, it should come as no surprise that the tribes who controlled this area, mainly Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim, played an outsized role in the history of this nation. And if we look at the borders today, we can see that the landscape is still having an impact. The West Bank is mostly that same hill country that was at the heart of ancient Israel and Judah. We can also see how basalt impacted the division between Israel, Syria, and the Golan Heights, and how Gaza is impacted by being in the coastal plain. Hopefully, this broad overview will help the map feel less flat. Now, when you read a story that mentions Bethel, you won't just recognize that it is physically located north of Jerusalem, but know something about the reasons why it was an important city in the region, or what kind of people might have lived there and why, and generally have a better sense of its place in the story. Next lesson, I hope to map an event and look at how laying out a story in terms of places and routes can help us understand it and give different insights than we would have maybe had otherwise. Hey, if you found this video useful, make sure you're subscribed and click the bell so you get notifications when the next video comes out, and share with somebody else who might find it helpful.